What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy, and what a day it is to be a Tulane Green Wave fan. And for fans in this last couple of weeks, what a ride it has been. As Alan would have said in The Hangover, how about that ride in? Definitely not the smoothest one over the last couple of weeks for the Green Wave after the departure of head coach Willie Fritz over to the Houston Cougars, and for lack of a better term, the chaotic mess that is the postseason and offseason that happened concurrently now in this really Wild West land of college football. The most important thing right now for Tulane was settling the ship. And geez, did they really knock it out of the park with Coach Jon Sumrall, where again, there's only so much you can judge on a hire on its face when there's no staff assembled, when you don't know what exactly the team is going to look like, and really until you see those players take a snap on the field under that next head coach. But Willie Fritz leaving was a critical moment for Tulane University, to be honest, where again, I'm not the Tulane historian out there, but I refer to myself as being in the lost generation of Tulane fans, where they had the success in the SEC and they had that 1998 year. And then those are really kind of it until the 21st century, up until these last couple of years. And while I was at Tulane, yes, I went to the New Orleans Bowl, something coached by an incredibly well defensive performance by then co-defensive coordinator Jon Sumrall for the Green Wave back in 2013. There's really just been nothing for Tulane. There's been nothing to hold on to. There's been no momentum, no sustained success, no consistency, what have you. And then when Willie Fritz came in here and took the position back in 2016, I believe that was something that he really envisioned for Tulane, was that idea of consistent, sustained success. He's just not going to be the one up to the task of managing that. You have a hungry young coach with a wealth of experience at that in Jon Sumrall, who's a proven winner at that. And every word he said today, I mean, it just felt like you were hanging on to every last word, and really just the buy-in, you could feel it in the room, where there was just a presence, this energy about him that it was an immediate fit. And it just felt like not only are things going to be okay, but things are looking almost higher than they are before. Sometimes I think adversity happens to programs and you either crumble or you come out of it, for lack of a better term, as a phoenix rising from the ashes. And not to get all dramatic here, but that really is the importance of what this transitional stage is for Tulane now, after they went to, I guess not technically the highest mountaintop, because, even though the playoffs are expanding this year, and that's something I'll touch on, Cincinnati did make it in despite being a G5. But again, to go and beat the Heisman Trophy winner in a New Year's Six game and go to back-to-back conference championships, well, now Tulane fans have gotten a taste of what consistent winning looks like, going 23-4 over the last couple of years. And I don't know if anyone could have really envisioned after the 2-10 season just 3 years back that not only would Tulane bounce back in the greatest single season turnaround in college football history, win the conference championship the first time that they played in it, and again, go on and beat the Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams in the Cotton Bowl, and then come back to do that another season in a row. Now there's an idea that really can happen at Tulane. And now you're looking at a situation where that same head coach, that coach that did so well at his job, that he got hired on to a Power 5 university. And so it's not a bad position to be in, all things considered. But it's a really critical moment when it's really the only coach that has done a damn in a very long time for the university. And for an athletic director that had never made a hire in his tenure, this was not a knockout of the park. It was a grand slam. And it's not just that he checks every box on paper. It's all those things when you talk about intangibles, and you could see them in players and guys like Nick Anderson. You could see all of that and more in a coach like Jon Sumrall. All right, now before I get into my spiel about my first impressions of Jon Sumrall, what this looks like for Tulane as a program, looking forward, that long-term vision, I do again just want to stop and take a second and give due flowers to new athletic director David Harris. In terms of the reaction to these two hires, really couldn't have been night and day from a lot of the fan base. And a lot of the time, that happens with something that you're unfamiliar with and something that's unknown. And when it's a situation like that where you hadn't heard of a name being circulated around, it's hard to think, well, did we really have any idea what was going on whatsoever? And I saw all these comments about Tulaning again. Meanwhile, keeping in mind that all things considered, this is a completely different position in that athletic director role than what it was looking at when Troy Dannon had taken that job around the same time as Willie Fritz. And so the idea that Tulane had to kind of find someone to fill that job just kind of seemed asinine to me. And then David Harris comes out in his opening remarks and said the moment that this job opened up for Tulane, he put feelers out to people that he's familiar with within these search firms and had those same connections that eventually led to Jon Sumrall. So connections and who you know certainly matter. And it also matters when people want these positions. And that's the vibe that I got from David Harris back in his press conference. I think the knock, I guess, if anything, that people were saying about him was it wasn't very high energy, that it lacked kind of a punch. That is just sometimes people's personalities. I feel like I can somewhat speak on this because I feel like as much as I'm out here, I do all this. I'm a host of a podcast. I'm on the radio as a sideline reporter. I've hosted 3-hour radio shows by myself, hosted the pep rally for Tulane before the championship game. I don't have stage fright. I don't have a fear of public speaking. And I was also a massive theater kid growing up. I don't really give off that energy all of the time, but when there's something to be said about having just kind of that performance energy. And it's not like you're putting on a show in a bad way, but there's something to be said about putting on play after play as a kid, learning how to do formal acting training, taking improv classes and things like that. Because in all honesty, I am a very introverted and largely shy person where if I'm at a party, I'm not really going up to people and introducing myself. It's just not really my personality whatsoever. When I have to put it on for situations, it kind of does just come out of me. But I always wonder, if I didn't have all that experience, kind of what my personality would have been like, especially kind of assimilating more into a way more social role. I mean, I started off my career in psychology, which is, yes, still working with people and talking with people, but working in the law, it's a lot more detached than being on the sideline and throwing myself into being social pretty much every single day. That whole spiel to say, sometimes people are shyer, sometimes people are introverts, and sometimes people just don't have these overbearing personalities. But what David Harris gave off to me in that press conference was authenticity. He wasn't trying to sell anyone up a river that he wasn't prepared to put a boat together and go up. And from, the time that he had to where he isn't even totally wrapped up in his duties at Iowa, let's give an MVP award out for multitasking and taking charge of, again, what could have been a really chaotic situation for Tulane. The other thing that stuck out to me in David Harris's background was he not only worked at Power 5 universities, but he was a player at an SEC school in Ole Miss. And that matters. I obviously don't have the numbers for this. It's really a project I don't care to spend the amount of time necessary on, but I'm inclined to believe more often than not that you don't always come across former players that, again, played at a Power 5 SEC school in Ole Miss be your athletic director, where when he talked about the student athlete experience and how important those kind of things are, yes, he didn't give explicit comments on things like facilities, where I think we've gotten a lot more clear of an answer, at least in terms of what's kind of been reported. I know Michael Arata went on WGNO with Ed Daniels and really did some great work. I recommend people checking that clip out. But you also got the sense from all of the conversations and all of the remarks today that those things are an important part of this entire conversation. They just don't need to say the quiet part out loud all the time. And that's kind of what I was reading between the lines there when David Harris was speaking, where he knows what these student athletes need to succeed because he was in their position himself and has worked at these administrations where they're playing football at the highest level, quote unquote, what have you. I mean, opinions aside about Big Ten, SEC, whatever, it's the top of the top in those situations. Has also worked at Wisconsin, and all of that really just matters to me. Also, again, opinions of people that I'm more inclined to go with, Deuce McAllister, former Saints player. He was a player at Ole Miss when David Harris worked in administration there and had nothing but positive things to say to Corey Glore about it and myself when I kind of reached out to him. And I'm kind of curious to talk with him a little more about that as well. But that said a lot to me, where that's a former player, a player that went on to be, it was the first jersey I bought as a kid growing up. It's just a wild life where I, have his information. But those kind of things matter to me a lot more than what, someone's introductory press conference necessarily sounds like. And nuance. That was a word that was also used today, but one of the knocks that I thought was at least fair to talk about with David Harris was that he had never made a hire before. And when he got this job, I know that, he was already kind of in the firestorm of, everyone was kind of saying, well, his most important job and his first priority is retaining Willie Fritz. And if not, then he, has failed at his job. What's he really supposed to be able to do in that little of a time frame? I just, in terms of how much agency he had in that regard, I really don't know. But what sticks out to me when we talk about the fact that he never had to hire anyone before is he never had to hire anyone before, which means, and it wasn't as if these the programs at Northern Iowa were all kind of flailing at the wayside. No, everything that I've seen about basketball, about the football, it's all been good situations, and retaining coaches is just as important as hiring them. And so, yes, he wasn't able to retain a coach for which he hadn't even accepted in his official role until January. But to me, his most important job was going to be his first hire. It wasn't going to be trying to fight a battle that he really didn't have that much to do with. And immediately when this job opened up, this was the name that everyone threw out there, that there was no question about this being the top choice. And it's a consensus like you kind of rarely see in college sports, to be honest with you, where everyone's a critic and everyone's an expert on their coach, on their program, and what have you. But it was just so obvious that everyone said this has to be Jon Sumrall. And I understand, again, the reticence and the feelings of Tulane fans that have been through it with this university, with this football team, with all the sports teams here, that really didn't know if Tulane would kind of be able to pull this off. And I mean, a week ago, this has been a week where we found out that Willie Fritz was leaving officially the Sunday after the conference championship loss, which was not 2 days ago, but the weekend prior to that. I mean, this time Monday is when we were all kind of publicly dealing with the fact that Willie Fritz had gone on and departed the university. And here we are a week later, and it feels like there's momentum that you really almost didn't feel before. And that's what I'm talking about, where sometimes when adversity really punches you in the face in the way that it did, in terms of just timing and that a lot of that being unavoidable. I understand, again, a lot of things that haven't sat well with fans. I'm really going to try to hit on all those points as I get through this. But for the reaction to this hire to just be, again, not that this was a knockout of the park for Tulane, that it was a grand slam, that Tulane identified their guy and they got him, and there was no crap and nothing blew up. And now they have their head guy in place. Now there is a captain at the head of the ship. I know that Slade Nagel is still the interim head coach, and Jon Sumrall gave, him his accolade and said that he's been very grateful for him kind of stabling the ship and acknowledging that they're all in a position of having to figure out their futures. And again, some of this conversation about how things are being handled, some of it is just kind of unavoidable and problems that Tulane never had in the past, to be entirely honest with you. But in terms of a first impression for Jon Sumrall, you want to talk about someone who has energy? He just had an infusion of really, really authentic firepower to him. It's not even energy. He comes in and he just packs a punch from the get-go. And the way that everyone was just so engaged throughout his press conference, I mean, multiple rounds of applause, standing ovations at that. And when he said things, you believed what he was saying. That is all that you could ask for in terms of what you're working with right now, which traits that you want to check off on your checklist of what a sitting head coach that has seen success. But all of the things today stuck out to me, like poise and command of a room, charisma. He was very charismatic. He was naturally very, very funny. And, some of the things were a little more jokey than not, but he was just kind of spitting stuff out there and people were fired up. I mean, I tweeted that I was ready to run through brick walls. So did Corey. I mean, that was kind of the consensus was, we're all ready to get on the field right now and go. That's how just rejuvenated everyone felt in the Glazer Club today. And just to think back to a week ago where it felt like, all that Tulane and these players and this program had worked to build and sustain and cultivate in terms of a legacy, or as Jarius Monroe put it, a dynasty. We're right back to feeling like Tulane is ready to freaking go. And that all comes down to David Harris, Courtney Gaucher, who I have to shout out as well as being involved in this process, and Tulane University. The comments that were made today by Jon Sumrall, by President Mike Fitz, everything that people have always talked about athletics and academics, I have to say that today was the first time it felt like those were so explicitly mentioned as not having to be something that needs to be pushed out for another, but how you can truly elevate a brand on an academic and an athletic program by using the two in tandem. That to me shone through all of the remarks more than anything else today. And that is exactly where Tulane needs to be positioned to truly sustain this level of success and look towards the college football playoffs. Well, to put it in the words of new Tulane head coach Jon Sumrall, if you're juiceless, you're useless, and this city has got a lot of juice. It's safe to say that he is the reason for that juice, where, again, this was the top choice, the consensus among Tulane fans, among the community. And what stuck out to me more than anything was the reaction by former players, players which attended today for that press conference that Jon Sumrall was able to mention by name. And just thinking about the fact that Tulane is a school where people on their coaching trees, on their way up the ladder, they spent time there and want to come back there and lead this program to new heights. And it's just a cool kind of tie-in for me, where those years that he was the co-defensive coordinator happened to coincide with my time at the university from 2012 to 2016. And he referenced the New Orleans Bowl and how good of a defense that was in that 2013 year. I can vividly remember watching that while I was home for Christmas with my dad and being quite honest with you, really shocked that Tulane was hanging in the game. And it was because of the performance on defense. And we all know that I am a defense person here. And so I am automatically really inclined to be fired up for a defensive minded head coach. But all of the stigmas, I guess, around defensive minded head coaches, you see it a lot more, I think, in the NFL, where there's kind of this shiny new toy syndrome going on, where everyone wants an offensive minded head coach. What you want more than anything else is a good play caller and a good delegator. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive, and they don't have to necessarily be on one side of the ball or the other, where I think a lot of teams, you almost run into an issue where if you have a head coach that's offensively minded and doesn't really want to give over those reins to someone else, it's a lot harder to find someone to come in and take those roles and look kind of to go on and succeed. Whereas in contrast to that, whoever is the offensive coordinator for Tulane next year, I mean, they have a lot of opportunity there. And we have no idea who's going to be calling the plays or not. But what stuck out to me in a lot of Jon Sumrall's comments today, both in his opening press conference, which I'll kind of start with, and then, his time with the media, was his emphasis on adaptability and how Troy has had to reposition themselves every couple of years based on the athletes they have, that rather than trying to fit square players into circle pegs, they will adapt their scheme and change things around and be more dynamic in some areas, depending on evaluations of, their skill positions, what their O-line looks like, what they're better at in terms of run protection and pass protection. I mean, we were getting some really good stuff out of this press conference today, but let's start with, what the qualities were as Tulane was looking for their 42nd head coach from when David Harris started off the press conference. First and foremost was they really wanted to target, if possible, sitting head coaches, that they were willing to look at those coordinators. But it says a lot about what Tulane sees itself as right now. And that is not at a point of rebuild or something where an up-and-comer could kind of cut. This is a place where you need, again, a really well-versed captain that is ready to come in and keep going full steam ahead. That's what I really took from that more than anything else. His comments about having care and concern for student athletes and continuing to mention again the student athlete component, and that meaning a lot more coming from an athletic director who was a former student athlete himself. They mentioned recruiting in the city and this state and this region. And yeah, again, that is something that all those boxes are checked off from. Not only that, but having, again, literal experience doing that at Tulane, and also seeing how different it is from when he was at the school up until his time now. That's really what stuck out to me when he was talking with the media afterwards. Was people were kind of asking, what is different? And he was there right when I was, where you saw what it was like at the Superdome, and then you saw the potential of Yulman Stadium when it was built in 2014. And he remembers it so well as to say that one of those kind of things that he looked back on as not paying attention to the small things, and that really being a sign for him about a school getting behind a football program, was that the sideline was on the other side when they opened up. It's now on the side of the stadium with, again, the home fans and all that comes with it. But just, again, having the presence of mind to remember something like that and make that a point to say that he feels that these things are different, that when he was leaving, that's when President Mike Fitz was coming into this school. And just to have, again, someone that is leaving a position of success that everyone's touting as, and really the question mark for him coming to Tulane was, well, he's positioned to get an SEC job in the next couple of years, so why would he bother kind of coming along to Tulane? He said it himself. And I liked how he said that, Power 5 and G5 is somewhat of a sham, or a scam, was one of the two. And I think he had a really good point there, in that there are a lot of Power 5 programs that aren't committed to doing things the right way. However you want to interpret that or not, I think we could all definitely agree with that. And then within the G5, there are probably some programs that are doing it better than some of those bottom Power 5 programs. There's always tiers in Power 5, in Group of 5. That's something I brought up on my last podcast about Willie Fritz in some regard, where even though there are these two harsh labels, there are still huge differences in what you're able to do depending on resources, depending on opportunity. And, from what I've seen, Troy had made a commitment to facilities. They have really put investments into those types of things. So again, for a sitting head coach who has gone 23-4 over the last 2 years, the same as Tulane has under Willie Fritz, 14-2 in conference play, and beat a ranked opponent last year in the Cure Bowl in number 25th UTSA. As much as we talked about Shield Wood's defense, talking about that preview for Tulane's game earlier this year, well, guess who coached the team all season? Your new coach, Jon Sumrall. And so you get someone that was in the midst of success at the top of the Sun Belt Conference, seeing a better opportunity at Tulane. And him talking about that we are going to sell out the stadium every single time we play, that Yulman is a fantastic venue, and it is a place that people are going to fear to come into. You really, again, you just believed everything that he was saying, and you really need someone to kind of come in at this point and keep this momentum going, keep the invigoration of the fans, all of the donations that we've seen this week to the Fear the Wave Collective, all the donated tickets that we saw going on for that championship game, of people donating those tickets so more students could come into the game. The fact that there was a torrential downpour that resulted in severe flooding for a lot of people the day of that game, and we still saw the turnout that we did. And let's be honest, that was the day where everything kind of broke about Willie Fritz, and I think it would have been really easy for a lot of fans that felt like this was all over to just kind of throw in the towel at that point. But everyone showed up and stayed. And we're seeing that happen in leaders on this team, and guys like Tyler Grubbs, all of the guys we've seen commit to playing over these last couple of weeks. And as we continue to kind of have that conversation about what's all going on here, I just hope that it all stays away from players, because they're just trying to make the decision that's best for them. And we just never know what factors go on into people's decisions. But I think a really important thing for Tulane fans to realize is Jon Sumrall is a coach that guys are going to want to run through a wall for. I really mean that when I say it. He just had that type of command, that type of energy. And when he said Tulane's going to go to the college football playoffs and we're going to win it, everyone started, that was a standing ovation moment for him. And it just didn't feel like empty words. And that is something that was unignorable to me in the conversations about, well, who's Tulane going to be able to hire that's not looking at a Power 5 job? Well, a lot of them aren't open right now. And it's a question of whether or not that coach and Tulane mutually see themselves as the best group of 5 team, because honestly, that's what we're talking about here. When you're talking about poaching a successful head coach who's at the top of his conference in the horizon of the time where next season moving forward, there's going to be a 12-team college football playoffs where the highest ranked group of 5 team gets in. All of this to me means that Tulane believes that they are that team because they went out and hired the guy that they think it can really get them there. And that coach in Jon Sumrall sees Tulane as the best opportunity to do that. That said a lot to me. The comments again about the academics, it is something that matters here at Tulane. But now you have the opportunity and you have a coach that's out there saying, we're competing for a college football playoff and we're going to win it. Again, if we had any questions about whether or not Tulane was committed to athletics as much as they were academics, those words just aren't leaving Sumrall's mouth today. They just aren't. And you're not selling players up a river of kind of promises that there's no intentions of following through on. So when I say in terms of nuance and reading between the lines, while everyone's kind of looking at facilities and what's next here, you don't take this job and you don't come out there and say those types of things with a confidence and just the feeling of genuine buy-in and belief without knowing that all of those steps are going to be taken, because the guys that are in that position, they were former players, both in Sumrall and in David Harris at SEC programs, with Sumrall being at Kentucky. And again, knowing what these athletes need on an academic level in order to thrive, on an athletic level in order to thrive. And that those two working in concert puts everyone's best interest, including the university, at the forefront. It's a better position than you could ask for Tulane fans and players looking to come play here. That's the pitch. You get a world-class degree, and now you have a legitimate shot at the college football playoffs. And to me, the right guy is in the position to do that in Jon Sumrall. Now, that being said, again, there was still an acting interim head coach in Slade Nagel, and everything going towards the bowl game, which I don't want to overlook here, because this is, again, it's important for Tulane to continue sustaining the success of this year, and that includes capping this off with a win against a Power 5 team when you're looking at talking about those conversations about the college football playoffs next year, and looking to be ranked earlier in the season, with Tulane having opportunities to do that with non-conference opponents scheduled in Oklahoma and Kansas State to start the year. It's really good to start that off with a win against Virginia Tech in the Military Bowl, which will be coached by Slade Nagel. And this, it's a challenging conversation to be had here, because there is definitely a right way to go about doing things. And what I can say is what Tulane has in a head coach, everything he said today, you can be assured that he is doing things the right way, and the right way by, his former team and his current team here, acknowledging, that Troy still has their bowl game this year on the 23rd at Birmingham Bowl. And I mean, he was very blunt in the media breakout portion afterwards, where he told players, and he's, from his remarks, and he was asked directly about, the situation involving Corey Platt, which is kind of, the elephant in the room here, discussion point, where he said he's not going to beat around the bush. It's a challenging conversation, and he can only handle these kind of things the way that he knows. His message to his players was, if they go into the portal before the bowl game, don't call him for help and don't ask him to come to Tulane. He challenged his guys to stay with their commitment and stay through the bowl, and that he refused to influence their decisions in any type of way. We can get into a conversation about, how things are being done, what's unfolding. But if you want to talk about someone doing things the right way, that you could not ask for more than that. And that's a really, again, a lot of the statements he said today, he was outwardly confident, but quietly confident, really at the same time, where, he also made a point to say he understands that in today's day and age, you have to start with recruiting your own roster. And again, acknowledging in a really funny way during the press conference, he said something like portal, what portal? And everyone started laughing, because just to have a coach really ease the tension of what has just felt like the most dramatic couple of weeks possible. And again, fairly so in some regards, it was just a necessary infusion of humor into that situation. But, we all saw the picture of him meeting with the team yesterday, and he said that he met with the coaches, he met with some of them individually. He's already putting his work into doing just that, and hopefully having some of those conversations with guys that are in the portal. And it just seemed like, again, he had a true empathy and understanding of everyone involved in this situation. And that recruiting really starts with the guys on his team mattering the most. He then went on to say that he's not bringing in any of his staff until after their bowl game is done. That's the way that he wants to do it. He also said that there are some guys on Tulane staff that he's looking to hopefully, again, be part of what they're doing in the long term. The way that he said it, where in terms of not bringing in staff until after the bowl, and in reference to everything going on with Tulane's coaching staff, he said it might not help in the short term, but it'll help in the long term because we're doing it in the right way. That to me goes beyond all the really good things about principle, character, integrity, all those things you could ask for. But someone willing to say that they know they might take some hits in the short term, when he's also talking about competing in the college football playoffs this upcoming year, that's, to me, that is confidence in true form, in being able to say, I'm willing to take some of these hits to do things the way that I want to do them. And that's what players are going to see. That's what staff members are going to see. And in my opinion, respond to it incredibly well. I just think, again, it's a tricky situation where, yes, and as someone that reported out where it had been confirmed and that was the case. I'm not saying things have changed, but now that there is a head coach in place, will he make some decisions? I think it's up to him now. And if nothing else, it doesn't feel like there's kind of who's the captain of the ship driving this kind of ghost ship. Where again, Slade Nagel has still been the interim head coach, but let's just be all honest here. I mean, if they get offered jobs on a different coaching staff, be that Willie Fritz's coaching staff, as rumors may have it, they very well might take them, if not whatever has already kind of gone on here. But it's a hard situation now when you add in the transfer portal and signing day. It's not to say that everything is blameless here, but it makes it kind of an impossible job for everyone involved. Where, I mean, I don't really know who's supposed to call the plays for Tulane if all of the coaches that end up going on to another job leave before the bowl is over. And again, with Jon Sumrall making a point to say that he's not bringing any of his staff here until the bowl game is over, clearly that means that there are coaches on Tulane staff that are going to be coaching this bowl game. These guys aren't going to go out there with no coaching staff. It is a really hard era where social media has made things really difficult. And I don't know if people always kind of think things through before, they tweet things out, but it is a difficult conversation where, yes, again, the elephant in the room being Corey Platt, who was a Tulane player that entered the transfer portal and he committed to Houston, tagging Houston, Willie Fritz, and Shill Wood and James Ross, who was the analyst that, I mean, his social media handle and things have been changed to University of Houston. I mean, these things are out there in public, so you can see them for what they are. It's not great. And I don't know anything, to be honest with you. But it is just not, obviously sitting well with fans, and I really don't blame people for feeling the way that they feel. It's hard when, you have a coach leave and feel like, it's almost, I don't really know how to describe the situation, but it feels like a breakup in a way, where Jon Sumrall kind of described his process of coming in as speed dating. And I just think that things that might not be that great of actions, if the emotions weren't as high, would it kind of feel the same way? It's hard for me to say, but I think it's fair for people to be critical, and I think it's fair for people to have questions. Just my take on it at this point is, I had those same kind of questions and concerns. I no longer do now that I have sat in a room with and heard from Jon Sumrall. Because yes, even though he still says that he wants to finish things out the right way and his staff is still over there at Troy, I mean, Tulane is his football team now. And I'm inclined to trust whatever he ends up doing in these next couple weeks. Troy Sumrall is not dumb. Troy Sumrall is not uninformed. He is, if anything, the complete antithesis of both of those things, where, again, to be even just cheeky about things that feel so sensitive, just displayed, again, just immense confidence to me in his vision here and being able to communicate that to staff players and keep this momentum going. And so whatever decisions he ends up making in these next couple of weeks, I just really think that they are the best decisions for Tulane University and for the football program. That's really how strongly I feel about how good of a first impression this was, all things considered, where just all of the things you could ask for acknowledging that there is a recognition behind Tulane of what football can do for the college environment and again, elevated academically at the same time. And that's something that can be a national brand in both ways. And that he feels a shift in that. And it's one big enough to have pulled him away from a job that tried to make a push to stay for him, that committed and is building, these facilities and is a winning football program. And all things considered, without perception, has the same shot to that one spot in the college football playoffs that Tulane does. So for Jon Sumrall to see this as a better opportunity when, again, people have said that he could be looking at, a job in the Power 5 in the SEC in just a couple years, if nothing else. And I don't get the vibe from him at all today, where, again, if we could learn nothing else from the situation here at Tulane, it's that coaches say things and then unfortunately people say things and then they act differently. They might change their minds, but it's tough again in an age where everything is out there. And sometimes in hindsight, you might have wished that you had worded things differently, or, again, we're lacking a lot of stuff behind the scenes here. But everything that you're kind of pulling together from just the small tidbits here for Jon Sumrall, here from just how Tulane moved in this last week, where again, this was a critical moment, if not the most critical moment in Tulane's history from an academic, or not academic, but, athletics standpoint, because football is king. And let's just all kind of be aware of that. And when you were hiring Willie Fritz, you had no idea what you were hiring at the time. There was no expectations here. There was no culture. There was no environment. There was no championship mentality. You have a championship mentality here now at this university, and you have a head coach that has that same mindset, that is poised to come in here and feels that full support here from the university. And again, to acknowledge that he could see those little things back when he was here, that, that Tulane doesn't quite get football. And once you start to see the nuances, those are the things where it really starts to matter, where, I think even the average fan doesn't always think about some of those things. Whereas one of the first things he mentioned was just the importance of Tulane's sideline being on the right side. Those are very, very fixable things. But when there are a lot of those things kind of out there, and that was a feeling when I went to school there, was that there was a complete disconnect entirely from the football program and from Tulane as a school. And I chose going there in spite of knowing that there really was going to be no college football environment for me, because it was something I was definitely curious about and knew I was really kind of giving that up by going to Tulane, where I did get to see, again, a good bowl game in that 2013 New Orleans Bowl. But before Yeoman Stadium was built, there was just no culture at Tulane. And now there is. And to me, it is a culture of champions. And Tulane has momentum now. They have momentum nationally. They have momentum as a brand. They have momentum as a program. For him to say that the trajectory here is out of this world and let's just double down on as far as we can take it. Again, all of the things that I think people might have wanted more of from the athletic director press conference, where, I just don't always think that that's what the athletic director needs to kind of say. But in this moment, you kind of needed to hear those things from the coach. And he was just coach through and through. And you really felt that feeling back in New Orleans, and just being able to meet him afterwards. My first impressions of, and I said this on Courtney Gaucher as well. My first impression of him was stellar. My first impression of David Harris was, I really, really liked the guy. I felt like he had that kind of familiar friendliness to him. And I'll just be honest, I really didn't have much of a rapport with Troy Dannon, and he was not that approachable to me. I'll leave it at that. David Harris, I felt entirely different about. And I've said, I still really, Willie Fritz did nothing but make me feel welcome here at Tulane. But immediately, I feel so comfortable. And I really think our broadcast crew really felt that with Jon Sumrall today, where, Corey Glore does the current podcast. Highly recommend everyone check that episode out alongside this one. He sat down with Jon Sumrall today and really kind of went through things with him. But it was just really nice for us to really have that moment. And just another example of how personable Jon Sumrall has been. They had the media introduce themselves and say what stations they're from, kind of saying, we might not remember you guys. And when we were all walking into the media breakout room, Jon Sumrall looked at Fletcher Mackel and was like, you didn't have to introduce yourself. I know who you are. I watched the news when I was here. And he saw Steve. He's like, Steve, oh my God, how are you? There was just this familiarity with him that really already existed. And this was kind of a moment that was a little frightening for me, not, Sumrall, just the idea of I had really kind of made my inroads here at Tulane and had really good relationships with the head coach, and that trickled down. And that's really where everything kind of starts with. We're all starting from square one. The broadcast crew starting from square one. Players are starting from square one. So to have that first impression be as comfortable as it is, to already again feel like I really am looking forward to working and just learning and seeing what Jon Sumrall does, seeing what his philosophies are. As a defensive minded person and as a lover of defense, his comments about how he switched from a 3-4 to a 3-3-5 to a stacked, I think if it's a 3-3-6 there, a 4-2, all of those things. I'll stop just throwing numbers out there, but what form is Tulane going to take? Are they going to take all of the above in that? All of his comments today just seemed so adaptable and versatile and fresh. Those are really the words that I could use to describe him. And when you have young blood coming in that has that really young energy, but has the experience and the presence and command that you felt in a leader and coach like Jon Sumrall, where, he said that he knew he wanted to be a coach when he was like 12 years old. And all of his comments about himself as a player kind of, not to toot my own horn, but they kind of reminded how I played soccer as well, where he said he led the team in tackles at Kentucky his junior year, and it's not because he was physically gifted at all. It was really kind of in spite of that he was maybe the smartest and toughest player there, and his nickname on the team was Drill Sergeant because he brought it every practice and made sure everyone else brought it too. I was not a physically gifted soccer player whatsoever. I had good touch. I was a precision passer, and I was a tough SOB who did not care if my head was in the dirt, if I had elbows in my face. And I was very smart because I knew that I wasn't that fast, and I knew that I didn't have a rocket of a leg. And so I had to really anticipate things as they were coming. And so I really kind of resonated again with that idea of those kind of scrappy types of players. And I really think that that's the idea of that scrappy, just really like go eat a bunch of nails and run through a wall type thing. Like if there are 100 George Kittles ready to run onto a field, that is the way that I could surmise how Jon Sumrall's energy is going to translate, I think, onto the field and the way that these players play. And that is probably the best endorsement that I could give. So again, there will be plenty of time to talk about the bowl, to talk about what's next for Tulane, but I do just want to take a minute and savor the moment after what was a really somber and hard week for people. And it's something that, again, is still playing out with things not really being as clean as you might like in terms of coaching and recruiting and who's on what staff at this point. But to feel this excited and, again, that Tulane is poised to not just take on this next chapter, but take it by the reins and really just go full steam ahead and double down on this feeling that we've all been having. That is more than just sustaining success. That is looking into a vision of Tulane athletics that we honestly can say that the best is yet to come.